So, what really interested me about the Snowden stuff and your involvement with it is I kind of want to pick your brain a little bit about more your opinion on it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people have misconception is the right word, or just a lot of people believe after seeing the Ed Snowden leak stuff and seeing how the NSA is allegedly spying on citizens without, the right to be doing so, people think that the FBI does that too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's make that. I think that's a great question. I do appreciate that question because I hate it when the FBI gets lumped into that.
Yes.
The NSA, whether you love them or you hate them, operates outside the boundaries of criminal law, right? Everything the FBI does, and you may love the FBI, you may hate the FBI, though, is going to end up being subject to scrutiny in court. And so the intelligence community, by design, operates with a lot less scrutiny from the judicial branch.
Yeah.
Every time I conducted a surveillance or did anything, or a search or an interview, I am subject to the four corners of that U.S. Constitution, and I'm going to be held to account for that in court. And so the FBI really doesn't have the luxury to kind of over-collect the way that the NSA was accused of doing by Edward Snowden.
So I'm just going to kind of pitch to you how my uninformed brain perceives this. I just want you to correct me along the way.
I appreciate your opinion.
So what I imagine is, let's say there's someone that, the government wants to investigate, right? There's a terrorist, a suspected, someone like that maybe they don't have a legal reason or legal authority to search their phone or tap whatever they have. What I imagine is the NSA is going to go do that illegally, right? They're going to go, not follow the law, kind of as you described, go on their own terms, and get some information on a person. Now, what I picture is an issue arising when they try to use that information, right? Because, as you said earlier, it doesn't fall into the bounds of law, so it may have been acquired illegally. How do they pass that information down to you guys to do something about it?
Let me start with your premise.
Okay.
The idea that the FBI is whispering to the NSA, we don't have enough to wiretap Mohammed. Can you wiretap him for us? Let me ask some questions. In this scenario, is Mohammed a U.S. citizen?
Yes.
Oh, really? Okay, so he's a U.S. citizen on U.S. soil.
Yes.
There's zero chance the NSA would do that.
Really?
Yeah, it's just not going to happen.
Why is that?
Because they don't spy on. Again, the NSA will spy on foreign nationals who are overseas. Quite often, if a U.S. person happens to be overseas talking to a foreign national overseas, the U.S. person will get intercepted. But there's zero chance that the NSA would ever wiretap an individual here in the U.S. It's against their charter. It's against what needs to happen at that point is that the FBI needs to gather enough evidence as to why they believe this person is an agent of a foreign power, take that to the FISA courts, the national security courts, and have a FISA judge authorize the wiretap of this individual. I've done that a bunch. And but the idea that we're going to outsource that to the NSA just because I
didn't necessarily mean you guys approaching the NSA. I mean more so the NSA on their own determines, hey,
here's what I'll tell you. Even in Snowden had all sorts of awful things to say about the overcollection of the NSA. He never said that the NSA ever wiretapped a U.S. citizen.
See, that's, I think, a very common misconception. I think that's something even me going into this, I haven't read the Snowden documents. I'm not super versed on it. That was my belief.
Right. No, a lot of U.S. citizens are being intercepted when they're making international calls. Okay, again, when I'm wiretapping Governor Blagojevich, I don't know who Blagojevich is going to call, right? So some poor pizza guy who is, when he's ordering a pepperoni pizza, is in theory being intercepted by my wiretap. And the same thing happens all the time with NSA when they're listening to someone overseas. And the reason they're listening to them is because that overseas person may be a threat to the U.S. And so if they're talking to a U.S. citizen at that point, I guess they're collecting information. But it's very different. The question is really, who is the wiretap on? And so, again, I'm not all about the Snowden revelations, but I believe what he's saying is that we had, that the U.S. government had backdoors to a lot of the big email providers like Yahoo, and they're just sucking up all the emails and putting them in these giant databases somewhere. That may be true, it may not be true, I don't know, but that's the overcollection that Snowden was talking about. Not that the NSA is spying on U.S. citizens in wiretaps on U.S. citizens. If he thought that was the case, I'm pretty sure he would have told us.
That's true. That is very true. Now, one of the other things that I find really interesting that I don't think is really a rumor about the FBI, but more of something that was done in the past. The FBI is said to keep a lot of info on people that aren't criminals. For example, files on celebrities like Elvis or like Frank Sinatra. Is that something the FBI does?
Well, let's talk about that. So back in the J. Edgar Hoover era, he was out of control in the last portion of his life. So he was seeing communists behind every wall, very much kind of a McCarthy, very much guy. So he would look at the Beatles who have hair down to their shoulders and think that those hippies who are against the Vietnam War must be commies and need to be investigated. So he was absolutely keeping files on people. Since then, though, we have the Attorney General guidelines that we operate under, and there are no FBI files on people. There's only FBI files on crimes. And so,
interesting.
So if you were interviewed in a case, because you were a witness in a bank robbery, or you were caught on a wiretap, and I just wanted to ask you, hey, do you know this guy? Our phone records show that you were on the phone with him the other week. What's his story? Then there would be a piece of paper in a file where you were interviewed by the FBI, but that's not a file on you. We don't. I mean,
you're just named in a file that's on a crime.
What a world we would live in if we had enough agents to kind of keep files on Americans. But it doesn't happen anymore. It absolutely happened in the FBI's past, and it's a shameful thing. It should never have happened.
Interesting. Another thing that I'm curious about, this is more of a rumor that I've heard than anything confirmed, but people generally say that cases that are investigated by the FBI or, FBI-related cases have a 99% conviction rate. Is that accurate?
If charged, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not every case that gets opened ends up resulting in a criminal conviction.
But cases that result in charges,
every case where the person's arrested or gets charged, because the FBI is not. And again, it's not that the FBI are these hot shots. It's that the federal prosecutors are going to demand that you were able to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt before they're going to bring criminal charges, because those guys don't like to go to trial and lose cases. And so the idea that the FBI is going to run off half-cocked and arrest people. The FBI investigates and then arrests. The police quite often, because of necessity, arrest and then begin trying to build the case through an investigation. I think the FBI way of doing it is probably more humane, but we're also not drinking from the fire hose of crimes that a local police department is.
Now, the second to last thing, I just have two more things I want to ask you about before we head out of here. Second to last, this is one that someone actually asked on Twitter, and I have to know.
Sure.
Can you or any of the other agencies really see us through our webcams?
The FBI cannot.
Okay.
So I that's the only one I can speak for, right? And I'm not being coy. I know that FBI Director Comey was very famous for taking a piece of electric tape and putting it over his webcam and taking it off. And I think that's probably not a bad idea. But I've never seen an FBI warrant where we get a warrant to watch someone through their webcam, and we're only going to ever watch somebody with a warrant, whether it's a national security court warrant or a criminal warrant. There's no version of the world where we ever spy on a person or listen to their private conversations without a warrant. So get that out of your head. But
that is something that is possible to do.
I don't know, and I don't think. My guess is I don't know. But if so, it's so deep in the national security side of the thing that it's nothing that the FBI is doing to America. And I know this because I have broken into people's houses and installed cameras inside their houses and workplaces with a warrant. And so why the hell would I do that if I could just flip a switch and turn on their webcam?
I think we're going to have to do a second episode, honestly. You've got a lot more stories, it sounds like. We're going to have to figure out a second one in the near future.